the problem goes away. If you want to implement your own Ajax component where you have an Ajax callback, and you need to get a URL out of that, we do Ajax using behaviors I was talking about earlier actually. But there's a get Ajax get URL or whatever it is in there, which you can then write out to your JavaScript strings. But when you're thinking about sort of binding things in, that only really happens from the browser. Responding to a message to the browser only happens when you make an Ajax request, when you click on something, when you submit a form. Those are the real three things that the browser can do for you. The other one, I guess, would be to request a resource. It's not really clicking on something if the page loads an image or something you want to generate custom image or something. Right, so you need to wait into that with the resource class.
So you just take one of the sort of the existing abstract components.
Yeah, so very much you don't build components from scratch. You don't build components from scratch where you worry about URLs, worry about how to handle things like that. No, you build a panel and you put a link there, and you just use the components which we give you and you build those. And combine them together. I mean, that's the power of it. You don't need to bother about handling all of this stuff and building your URLs, working out what gets passed to what. You just use what goes things first.
Okay. We're on an extended questions and answer session here, but I'm going to pass back to Al because I was going to do some more advanced topics.
Okay. So yeah, just a quick bit of slightly more sort of real-world advanced usage of Wicket in terms of how you build. I said earlier the powers that you can build these usable components really easily. So how do we actually go about doing that? Let's make something which actually is interesting that we might want to use in a real project and solve real-world problems. So we'd like to build a web app. Now, what web apps have? Web apps have lots of list views and lots of form views. And this is an example of a form from Jira. It has a bunch of things. You can imagine in your kind of backing model that you might implement this with some strings and maybe some enumerations for the issue types or something like that. So what I'd really like to do is actually get away from the whole stupid web app building mentality of what we're going to do is we're going to make a table on a page, and I can manually define all the cells in it, and I'm going to bind the components in the cells into this model somehow, so I'm going to write a line of blue code at least for each of these items. We shouldn't have to do that. We should just be able to go, right, well, this is a class, this issue, whatever it is, we should have an issue class, which has these fields in it. And we should be able to get our web framework to just go, right, a bit like Ruby on Rails, to go, okay, we'll just build a form. So you can do that with Ruby on Rails with scaffolding, but then the problem comes that the database there doesn't scale, and if you want to change it, you basically have to throw it away and start again. You can't extend the scaffolding and make it do what you want very easily. So let's have a look and see how we might want to do this in Wicket. So what are we going to have? Well, we're going to have a table. It's going to have a row for every field and every property in our beam. We need a label to tell the person what it is. And we need to have some kind of editor for it, like a text field or a drop-down box or something. And we need a form with a save on. So how can we automate that? Well, Wicket gives you these things called repeaters. Repeating view, which is the most simple one, and that lets you take what you see here, let's say a div with Wicket ID in it. You can take a repeating view, you can add div to a repeating view, and then every time you add a component to the repeating view, it pretends to be this div, so it just stacks many divs in. I'll have a look at the code for that in a minute. It's slightly difficult to explain in words, it's very easy to explain the code. Okay, we'd like to display the name of the fields, because obviously the field is probably going to have something like status, and that may be appropriate for a user face, but it's not going to be appropriate if we're in France, so we'd like to be able to internationalise it, we'd like to be able to put whatever we like in our labels on our form. And we're going to need to add some kind of editor, so let's worry about that later, and we need to have feedback pattern so we can tell when the user is messed up. Okay, so what's it going to look like? Well, if you look at the top, so the third section of the page, we have the HTML first. And you can imagine we're going to have a table and a form wrapped around these particular rows, but for an individual row, it's going to look a bit like this. We need some kind of container for our other two components. and that is this web markup container. You can see it down the bottom. We'll talk about it in a minute. So we add a new repeating view on fields, and then for each actual field within our object.
Excuse me, I suppose the fact that this TR and TD is completely irrelevant.
Yeah,
it's just from the design. So
yeah, absolutely. So these could be divs, or you do what you like them. I've chosen to put them in a table because, hey, sort of displaying a format, let's make a table is okay, so we're going to set these things in. Then we get the declared fields on our object. So we take a little bit of reflection here. And the way that repeating view works, when you want to add in a new one of these things, so a new row, you just go repeating view, new child ID, and this will generate us, so it's a magic function. Essentially, it generates you a child ID. So whereas you wouldn't normally put in the fields or the name or whatever, because we're generating lots of these, Wicket needs to generate a new ID for us for each one.
Sorry, can I just ask you a question about that new child ID? Because field is basically, it's like from child whatever in the reflection package, isn't it? So you basically kind of doing some kind of bytecode enhancement or something like that?
So what we're doing here is we're it would help to slightly better naming this, I must admit. So what we're doing here is, if you look at the fields as this repeating view, this is a Wicket component. There is no fields for
sorry. I mean,
yeah. So we've got field and fields. They should be fields. Which probably is called a row. Rows normally better.
Yeah. Sorry, I just misread it.
Yeah. Rows would be better.
So new child ID function and repeating view, not
exactly field. Exactly. So we have this thing called web markup container. Now you don't see these if you're doing trivial Wicket development, but if you need to have a container object that doesn't actually do anything at all, just has children, then we can use this. Which is what we're doing here. Our table row that doesn't actually do anything by itself, it just contains a couple of other pairs. So that's all that is. So we add this container component into our repeated view. So for each field, each reflected field in our class of this object, we're adding in a new row. And for the row, we're adding in a new label, and label is just it's basically the simplest Wicket component there is. It just takes whatever you put in as your second constructor argument, and we put a model in there instead if you want, and take a little string literal if you like. It just puts that inside the tags. So that will replace, where it says a name here in your markup, that will replace that with the name of our field. So if we have get status, which is a being for our issue, which has a status field, which is enumeration, so that will say status. And then we have this function get editor, which you need to go away and implement. Now I don't want to get into how that works. If you want to look at how that works, you can go and download some code from the installer and have a look at the actual source code for this example yourself. But that's quite easy. I just don't want to have to get into it because it's 5 slides to go over the one for the string and the one for the drop downs, the one for enumeration. But it's really quite simple. It's only, I guess, 20 lines of code to do 3 or 4 different field types. So you can have a look at that later yourself.
But the idea is that just like label, there is a Wicket class for each drop down types.
So you'd be getting a text field. If it's so the point here, the get editor is going to be going. It's going to be looking to see what the type of the field is. So we'll go, oh, it's a string. I need to return you a text field. Oh, it's enumeration. I need to give you a drop-down choice which has the list of all the enumeration types that exist. So you can have a look at the code later.
Just when it feels a new child ID, presumably that's something which is just kind of just a magic number which you could actually reference through JavaScript.
You could reference that through JavaScript if you want to.
Would you have a reliable way of getting a reference to
yeah, so in row, given that row is just a markup container, we've given a child ID, you can go row.get markup ID. There's a difference between Wicket makes a difference between the ID of the component, the Wicket ID of the component, and the output HTML ID of the component. So as in when you're doing your CSS, you go hash name. And the reason for that should be fairly obvious to you, which is that if you reuse your component in lots of different places on the page, you're going to then be reusing the same Wicket ID in lots of places on the page, and you can only have an HTML ID once on the page. So if you want to, Wicket will automatically generate HTML IDs for you called set output markup ID true on the component, and you can do again markup ID for your JavaScript to do your pretty script access effects on it, whatever you want to do. Cool, so we add these things in. So that's all there is to it, really. So the guest editing page is tedious, but fairly obvious once you've started doing your Wicket development, and you can have a look at the example, which I'll give you a link to later. So that's okay, but we're not doing what we said we'd do with the labels. We said that we wanted to put the ability to change status into some kind of French thing. I don't know what the French status is, probably exactly the same. So we can sort that out. Wicket has got incredibly good localization support. All you need to do is decide, it's just like sort of Spring MVC or any other web framework. You have a key, which is your bit of text that you're trying to localize, your key for that, and you just create a properties file. And you can create one for English, one for French, one for German. The cool thing about it is that Wicket inherits these things all the way up the markup tree, and then there's also an application one as well. So say, for example, you want to write a bunch of pages which all use the same terminology. Say you've got tabs on the page that go browse, create, favorites or something like that, and you have this on lots of different pages. You can put that single translation in one place, which is great. Lots of frameworks like that. But you can also override it for a given page if you want to. It's really easy to do, really easy to do when you need to write those. And you can also define entire different HTML files for different locales, or you can put there's a special tag you can use in your HTML which spits out locale messages for you. And you can also use string formatters and number formatters, so if you want to specify some kind of number, obviously the order of things changes depending on which language you're in. So saying you have 3 days left or something like that, you're going to want to put the numbers in different places. You have 3 days left to do the X, 4 days left to do the Y, you know, and so on. So we give you great support for all this stuff, is the point. You can look it up on the Wicket wiki as to how it works. Cool, so in our case, the string is also on the way to actually access all the stuff from code. And that will also have a proper stuff for you. So what's that going to end up looking like? Well, it just gives us a little form. So that's quite nice. And I've sorted it out so that we have a client object here with the name of the country and whether it's live or not. And the country is just an enumeration, and the list of drop-down list which it builds for the countries is just pulled out of the enumeration type using reflection. So that's all automatic. So that's kind of cool, but it doesn't really seem very flexible, because what happens if we don't want to let people create entries with a blank name? How do we handle that? Well, we don't want to break things out to write all the code manually, because the whole point of this is we're not trying to do this manually. So we need to have some way of automatically picking up whether a field is required. For Wicket components, you can call set required on your component. And Wicket will do a validation check for you and make sure that someone's putting some data for that. So for the text field, for example, you just call text field.set required true, and it goes away and validates it for you. Correct. So how do we know whether to do that? Well, there are some quite sensible frameworks out there for doing this kind of stuff in databases already. JPA has null annotations for many-to-one mappings and things like optional faults. And you might want to use Hibernate Validator perhaps if you're using Hibernate, that has annotations on it as well. So we can just easily, obviously, when we're creating this editor, we can look at this field because we've got a reflective handle to it, and we can pick up the annotations of it and see if it's required. If it is, we can also apply. Really true. In the example which you can download, I'm creating a required annotation, so you don't need to know anything about how Hibernate works or political dependencies and things. So you can attach that to the field in your class, and Wicket will magically set it up for you. You also need a feedback panel. Which we'll go on to here. Okay, so yeah, you can also do things like maximum and minimum. We have various different validators. Jamal showed you one earlier for the email addresses. We also have support for all the other things you might expect, like lengths of fields and to match URLs to a number, that kind of thing.
Just on the Hibernate validator, those annotations, are you saying that we're essentially doing something smart with Hibernate validator? That's essentially
so you can write the code in the getEditor method that we will get. you can write the code to pick up the annotations and do something smart with them. Particularly for Hibernate validations, actually you can cheat, because we have a Hibernate validations project, some integration work with that. Whenever you bind a model to a beam which uses Hibernate validations, it actually picks all that stuff up for you, so it adds the string length required and everything like that. So if you set things up with a property model or a compound property model like everyone does for mapping these beams normally, and in fact we do that externally with this getEditor, because we can't steal into an object, so we just go new property model object field.getName, and it just works. It will pick up a type for you, it's an integer, and make sure that the user's putting in an integer. It will pick up your Hibernate validation annotations and add those on, and do all the stuff automatically for you if you include the right bits. So we can pick those things in, and we can do this how we like. It's all just Java code, it's nothing magic. What's really nice about the fact that it's just Java code, rather than configuring this in some thorny XML file somewhere, is that you can write a bunch of Java code to do this, so you can look at your annotations on your class and put in whatever you like. You don't need to, how else can you do this when you write a maybe if you have to configure this in an XML file somewhere as to what your lengths are for your fields and things, how do you do that? Do you write a Maven 2 plugin which goes and spiders all your classes and writes the right thing out to your XML? Craziness, just do it in Java. And we have this feedback panel so that the user can tell us something's going wrong. What's that look like? Well, if we don't put the client name in and click save, it just tells us that it's required. Great. And that's a fairly trivial example. So we can extend this however we like because it's just Java. So what happens if we want to restrict access to these fields for different users? We want the administrator to be able to set various fields, but normal users not to be able to. Well, we just write some code. You can see how that might work. Rather than in your getEditor, you can check to see if you have an administrator role present, if you need to have administration on an administrator role to edit that particular field, and instead you could just return a label, which is a read-only, rather than a proper editor. So yeah, it's all just Java. On which note, if you go there, you can download the source code for an example of this, and have a look at it and see how it's all structured. It's just an Eclipse project set up with Maven 2, so it'll download all the dependencies and things for you. It's based on the quick start, which I showed you earlier in the evening, so it works exactly the same way. And that'd be quite a good way to see a not completely trivial, reasonably real-world use case for Wicket as built for a reasonable component quite nicely, and also how the default application is set up, what you need in your web XML, all of that kind of nonsense if you're interested in pursuing this further, which I hope you are.
How much configuration do you actually need in a Wicket application? I mean, obviously you need something in the web XML to say this service or that service. You need, what do you actually need?
There's one point there, is that this is so typical of the Wicket approach, because a lot of other frameworks and people from those frameworks would probably be making such a big deal that there's no XML involved to it. And we haven't even mentioned it, I've just realised. No one's actually mentioned it, there's no XML involved, apart from web.xml.
So, you have
I was waiting for that.
Yes. I just realised.
There's no XML in
No, that's...
Wow.
see how well it's not large, you can't read, right? See that? So,
That's the first.
Yeah. And we didn't mention it.
That's all the web XML. That all fits on a single screen, in fact. That's all you need. We set it up as a filter so you can map things to your group contacts and have your URLs, however you like in the namespace, but it'll drop through and serve resources if it doesn't match. But it would fit on half the screen if there wasn't a big comment. So, yeah, that's all there is. You just need to pass it your application class name, and then you're wondering what that is. Well, let me show you that. That's all of this bit. You just tell it what your home page is. That's all you need. If you want to, you can configure stuff in there. You can mount your pages on URLs, which Matt showed you earlier, and do all sorts of other setup in there if you want to. To give you an idea of how much Java config you actually need in terms of lines of code on an application, which isn't a hell of a lot of application, it's quite complicated. I have a really complicated Wicket app at work, and that is about 50 lines in there. And that's mainly so that I can configure all my Spring everything from one place. So I have a magic way of changing how my spring is configured depending on the deployment ID, system content, passing to everything. So what was that? If you want to do spring integration, then
yes, please.
there's init method here, which is where you can do this initialization. And I don't know if I have the appropriate classes here at home, but we shall see. You go add component instantiations, then view spring. No, I don't know. Let me just attach that. Give me 1 second.
So you have to go and actually find the Spring application context.
No, it does that for you. Provided you configure things using the standard Spring web application context.
So you can,
thing, whatever it is.
so you can inject
Let me just
dependencies.
show you how that works.
Yeah, yeah.
Right,
Right,
just Wicket Spring. Yeah, Spring applications. We also have Juice support for Google Juice if you prefer that for your IOC containers. So let me show you both. And
Which house I mentioned, but what was the wrote that in the Al wrote that in the one lunchtime, right? Reduce integration.
something like that. Something else. I promise once you set this sort of stuff up, you only do it once. Where are we? I've probably got my class messed up because this is using the jar files and the other one I imported. But you add a magic instantiation this thing here. Actually, let me show you an example which does work. So Wicket examples. We'll live in here.
So what will it then get from the Spring context if you do that?
So the way that Wicket does its Spring injection is that in your panels in any class you can just go like this. Got this working, but go to Spring bean, whatever the type is. So have a IDAO, and that will actually give you a logo for you. So if you want to make it match not based on type, you can specify the name of the implementation and match it with being name.
Coming to a question before about how the components are persistent, this is actually a proxy to the DAO, so you don't have to fall back to the DAO to make it.
So they'll only give you proxies. They'll only give you proxies.
Yeah. So you've got
So
everything.
the idea with this is that when you serialize your components, you don't want to serialize your DAO reference as well.
Yeah.
So we sort that for you.
Right, okay. So presumably the
That's
last
an implementation.
presumably relies on the Spring being implemented by an interface or not.
No, it works with classes as well.
I guess it can't be fine.
It just matches on the type.
Yeah.
So it uses all the Spring stuff uses CG there internally, so you can proxy classes no problem. And Spring does that. So yeah, I mean, so I've got a real proper example of that working in class. So if I start up the
Have you got the phone? Is it the phone book with that?
well, we should be able to start examples. It's in somewhere.
Why would it serialize that class?
So when you generate these pages, so someone goes, well, the way that the life cycle of components works is the user goes to the URL for your kind of bookmarkable page, has a standard page, it creates an instance of it. Now, you want to be able to call all the on-click methods and other things like that within this instance when the user then comes back after they've clicked on a link in the next request. So we need to persist this instance of the page somewhere, otherwise we can't do that. If we don't do that, you have to start managing all the state internally, you go back to sort of control the stuff and sort of pain. So we're storing a copy of this page. So in order to do that, we need to serialize it, potentially, if you wanted to work across a cluster. And in 1.3 we have, if you're worried about the amount of space that's taken up in memory, we actually serialize stuff on disk. So once, the reason we keep multiple copies of your page, so if you click the back button 3 or 4 times, and then click on something, it will still work.
The page is an option of that class. And those contains the password.
Yeah, so it contains all the components. So when you have something with components, they need to be serialized too.
Plus HTML.
So the HTML is just loaded off the disk, isn't it? So yeah, that doesn't so this works. This probably works.
There's also a lot of work with terracotta as well, so you can use that for customers.
And you're saying that for every request that comes in, you basically take some snapshots of the component state and get serialize it and store it as potential numbers. And then
In 1.3, it's this by default. This by default in 1.3.
It's one of those things that you think, ooh, this sounds complicated and horrendous. Until you think, well, let's just try it and see if it works, and profile it and see if it's fast enough, and see whether this is any good. Can we just take a reasonably, like the approach we'd like to take, if we weren't worried about performance. Let's see what happens. And it turns out that actually it's not bad for performance, especially if you optimize all the corner cases. And, we've gone through and done all this stuff. So people who are worried about scalability, particularly in terms of number of concurrent sessions and things like that for Wicket, the only people who are worried about it are people who haven't actually got profile applications, is the real answer to that. So we can support quite happily. We've got some thread testing programs, and we do profile things every now and then, we change together for releases and stuff. And we can support, I don't know, about, I think it's something like 600 simultaneous requests a second at the moment, which is on a really complicated page with about 1,000 components on. So I mean, that's quite a lot more JSF. Any implementation of JSF I've seen can do quite that in magnitude. And in terms of server space, for a complicated page, we're typically looking at maybe 20K per page at most. And most pages are sort of well under 5. We have to get a really complicated page before it starts to get much more than that. So,
When do you remove those instances of the pages?
So in 1.3 we have this implementation where we only keep the last page in memory and just put them out of disk. And you can set it up so that you keep 500 megabytes worth of pages and has least risk of use strategy on that and all that kind of stuff. So I typically use serialize with session, HTTP session perhaps. So then the strategy just becomes, well, how often do you expunge your HTTP sessions and all that kind of thing. But it scales pretty well. We have people using this with many concurrent users, sort of news sites, things like that, which have a lot of concurrent users of it. It scales fine. There's been a lot of optimization done to make sure that's the case.
But basically, until the HTTP session is removed, those pages will hang around.
Yeah.
But they are not literally in the session. They are only.
So one of them will hang around in memory, and the rest of them will hang around on disk. And if you're seriously worried about how many pages you can store on disk, only about 10K each, I suggest you go and buy a big server. Because really, I mean, a megabyte for 100 pages, how many users are you going to have, how many pages you need to store. If you're storing, you can customize how many pages are kept as well. So you can say that you only want to keep the last 10 pages, so it should give you 10 backup bits before it breaks. So,
sorry.
Sure.
If you do go beyond that 10 page, those 10 pages, what happens?
The user will get a page which says the page is expired. Give the link to the home page, and you can customize that. So it's a better situation. Very recently, when I was 1.3, we have some for the stateful pages. We have a better URL strategy for that, so that if it's all expired and it's gone wrong, then at least the user gets back to the original page that they're on the adopted page.
If you have a workflow where, say, for example, you go into a checkout, and then say and then you basically click on the buy button, and then your payment goes through all that, and then you start using that previous component trees.
Sure, so I mean,
how does it manage that situation?
it's managing sort of component trees and handlers and click handlers and things for you. So in any state which you change in a click handler and you're back there, you know, we're not going to magically solve all of your business problems for you. And that's so. I mean, for that particular case, if you clicked yes, I want to submit this order, and you went back to the page and you clicked yes, I want to submit this order again, then obviously you need to do some kind of checking on the code to make sure these are submitting the same thing twice. Now, it would be fairly easy to write a behaviour which you could attach to the submit button, which checks to see whether someone clicked it twice, in which case you could give the user an error message. That would be 10 lines of code. You could add that to all of your submit buttons. You could extend the submit button to always do that, and then just use your extended class. That would be really easy. So yeah, I mean, we give the tools to solve these problems very easily, but I mean, we can't magically fix the fact that you've run a bit of code which then we're trying to write again.
Did you leave the state of the page as well? Did you tell that to
Well,
or this exact problem?
so I guess it's a situation where you kind of you've done your submits, but then you kind of come back. I think what you probably really want is not to have that state. You really want to have a state saying that it's expired, so that you have to submit. Anyway, you wouldn't necessarily want to have those component states in the case.
So we handle all of this for stuff within the framework. My point really is that if you jump outside the framework by going to a database or going and doing a submit to Google Chat app or something, that we don't provide you undue support for that kind of stuff because we can't. Sure. I think to manage all that kind of stuff is
But multiple forms of it is really something that's quite commonly solved in web frameworks. So many frameworks prohibit you from submitting the form twice.
yeah, we can do that very soon. Okay, so yeah, there we go. It was just a class path issue, so you just do this. So this sets up the Spring. Not to highlight that, it's easy to read. So in Spring, this sets up the whole app for doing this Spring Bean injection or components with annotation. And same thing for Juice, so new Juice injector. And this goes away and finds your Spring application context using the standard Spring way of doing that, web application context users.get required application context or whatever it is. If you don't want to use standard Spring way of setting up application context using a server listener, then you can pass your own context in there and do it however you want. Same with Juice. Cool. So that's about it, really. Anyone have any questions?
Just one about unit testing. Okay. What's the typical strategy for unit testing?
So we have really, really good unit testing support, for something I should mention. We actually give you classes to be able to unit test stuff outside of the server container. So when you're creating a panel which has links and things on it, you can go and simulate clicking on it and what the response should be. Or you can do that for Ajax stuff as well. It's not possibly a question I can answer in 3 minutes because all the different ways of doing that, there are lots of different ways of plugging things together and what particular problem you're trying to solve.
But it's easy.
Yeah. I mean, the test coverage on the framework itself, it's kind of easy around all for unit testing, because the test coverage on the framework itself is pretty impressive for a web framework. We have some unit tests for Ajax things, which, yeah, sure, we can't test to make sure the browser is doing the right thing without having a browser sitting there, but we test it out as far as we can. Great. Right, well, thank you all very much for coming. I hope you've learned something about Wicket and might be inspired to go and download the code, which I shall leave the URL for.
Well, thank you very much, Matt. You can get a Java Police bag. One more bag. One more bag. Go in.